Hi friends, Janie J here. Today I want to talk about order versus disorder and how to keep from being overwhelmed. Now, we all know that we do need some amount of order in our lives so that we can function properly, so we can make it to appointments, we can keep track of our stuff and find it, and also so we can actually get something done. But there is a thing about taking it a little too far. And let me explain about a story from my previous life. So I am quite into yard work and being on 5 acres, there's always plenty to do. But I used to be what I would call obsessed about it. I wanted my yard to be perfect, and I was always afraid if I started on it, I wouldn't have time to finish it later, so I just kept working and working. I was also afraid of being criticized for the place not being perfect. Another thing was I was quite guilty of a thing called one-more-thing-itis. Now, you may have heard of this. This is when you keep adding one more thing. You're in the middle of doing a task, but then, well, let's just add that one more thing. And then you get that almost done and you add one more thing. And so, as you can imagine, it just keeps growing and growing and growing until the whole task is totally overwhelming. Well, I was doing that all the time to the point of exhaustion, like starting early in the morning and going until it was dark and I couldn't work anymore. This is not a good thing. In fact, one time it led not just to exhaustion, but what I would call heat exhaustion, because it was over 100 degrees and I was still determined to go out there and get this yard work done until I finally had to come in, sit down, and get something cool to drink so I could keep from passing out. Now, we don't want to get like that again, and I've learned a thing or two since then, and I want to share some of those tips with you so that if you start getting overwhelmed, you'll have some ideas to draw upon. Well, one thing I learned first off is that I can't keep it up. It's too overwhelming, it's too difficult, and it's just not worth it. So I had to learn to let it go, and one of the ways was to pace myself. So, like, let's say you have a big job, maybe even something like cleaning the house or cleaning out a filing cabinet. Instead of tackling the whole job at once, just pick part of it that is going to be your goal to get done. And I call it pacing yourself. So you're not going to clean the whole yard today, like just pick the rose garden and just do that part. And then when you're done, you have a sense of accomplishment, but you're not overwhelmed. So try that when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or like you have too much on your plate. Another thing is when you're pacing yourself, think about that the goal is to move forward, to have some progress. The goal is not perfection. So if you keep that in mind, then you'll feel like more like you're getting the right things done. And the other thing is we put so much stress on ourselves by having the goal of everything being perfect that you'll find that once you let go of that and you set your standard a little bit lower, as things could still be organized, but just not to the point of, perfection. And then your stress level goes way down. So life is a lot more enjoyable in that situation. But every once in a while, it comes back, that overwhelmment. And then you wonder, well, what am I going to do? Well, remember that there is a balance between order and disorder. And things don't have to be perfect. Think about what are the consequences if you don't get something done. Is it really that dire? Or is it just, your mind trying to make you think that you have to do everything perfect? I'll give you an example. I used to keep the house perfect. So it was really hard with kids and a husband and 2 dogs. And now I don't worry about it so much. So if I don't get my dishes done, let's say I have to hurry up and get to an appointment or a meeting, I might leave the dishes in the sink. Or I might even leave my clothes on the floor if I don't have time to pick them up, like if I'm really in a rush. But I don't worry about it because I figure I can just do it later. And the most important thing is to get to my meeting on time. But I have had times where somebody would show up unexpectedly, namely my son. And he is totally aghast that mom has dishes in the sink because that wasn't allowed when he was a kid. But I've learned to relax a little bit and not let it get to me. Because honestly, how many of us are going to have a household inspection on a regular daily basis? So, we really don't need to worry about that. Our homes do not have to look like something out of a magazine because, let's face it, that's a photo shoot. That's not a real house where real people live, or at least not at the moment. Otherwise the kids' bedrooms would be messy and the bathroom towels would be messed up, that sort of thing. It's not, it's a fantasy. So we need to quit thinking about our life that we have to live it like a fantasy. What we have to do is think about how to have a balance between order and disorder. And I would say perfection, like let that go and let the game plan be that you just want to avoid chaos. So it doesn't have to be perfectly organized. Like you don't have to have all your socks color coded and your t-shirts folded perfectly and everything in the pantry lined it up. It doesn't have to be that perfect. It just has to be so you can find stuff. So in other words, you don't have to go in the laundry room and look for some sort of food, or you know that your screws and your hammer and your other those kind of tools are in the garage or in the shop or in your toolkit. They're not in some other room. They're not in the back of the kid's bedroom. So you have to think about that. Like it's nice to have things organized, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be so you can find them or so that they work in your day-to-day life. Something that a lot of us need to do is we need to give ourselves permission to have a little chaos and a little unorganization in our life. And don't judge ourselves as a failure if it's not perfect, because those are really unattainable goals. And it isn't going to make you any happier to have everything perfect. What's going to make things better in your life is a sense of calm and peace. For instance, think about like if you have company over, like you might want to have maybe you have the meal planned out a certain way, the table's all set, and et cetera, et cetera. And then something comes up, like let's say somebody brings a dish to share at your meal, but it has to be cooked for 30 minutes. And instead of getting up in a tizzy and thinking to yourself, well, everything's planned to be ready in 5 minutes. Now this is really going to throw it off. Don't worry about it. Or if your meat is you're making some kind of roast or something and it's not ready, just be calm, because things will work out and your guests aren't going to remember that something was late, or that you ate 20 minutes later, or that you had to wait an hour because the roast wasn't done. What they will remember is if you're all crabby and anxious and rude. So you want to just learn to take it as it comes and just try to look at the big picture, which is, making sure everybody has a good time. Don't judge yourself as a failure if things don't turn out perfect. Keep in mind that the goal is a happy, grateful, and a kind life, a positive life, that kind of thing. And remember that other people do pick up on our moods, so you don't want to spread any of your anxiousness or your angst to them. I mean, it's bad enough if we feel it, but we certainly don't want our friends and family to feel it. But most of all, we need to keep in mind that all that is required is not perfection. All that's required is that we try our very best. And I would encourage you to do that, because that's one of the ways to live your best life.